Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, you are listening to Change Agents Hall of Fame. Tonight we have a follow-up on Change Agent Carlos Castaneda from a previous show that we did by James BraveWolf, who has some important points to add to the discussion of Carlos
Hi, Lala.
Castaneda.
I hope they're important.
Hi.
We'll try.
Yes. So mostly you have an in-depth perspective on how each book that Castaneda wrote introduced a specific social meme into the collective.
Yes, exactly.
Could you explain a little bit about the term meme?
Sure. First, I will answer that. That's very important to understand what a meme is and what it does. It's an actual weapon that invades your mind to the point where you accept it as just common reality. First, I wanted to explain, again, Carlos Castaneda and why we should bring up this kind of guru from the 1970s. Even if you've never read a book about him, he is instructive because he gave everyone a false world and a new religion. And so a lot can be learned from looking at this this man and what he created and the millions of books he sold all over the world that he still sells today. And again, most people don't know his name, but he influenced millions. And even in my high school, we studied his books in sociology class as if they were real books. And so for people who are a little unaware of him, he wrote books about a Yaqui Indian named Don Juan and Don Juan's approach to life and his shamanic journeys and his kind of way of a warrior and seeing the invisible. And the books were proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that they were fiction. They've been published by the biggest publishers in the world as nonfiction, and today they're still listed as nonfiction, but they are fiction. They are lies. And granted, you can learn, and I have learned, great things from fiction, which are lies. People who write fiction, that's partly true and partly not. You can learn from myth, and that can change your life for the better. So myth and fiction are very important stories. Very important. So we don't blame him, or I don't blame him for that. But what I blame him for is that he was creating a new religion with this false construct. That is his crime. He led us down a path that was a dead end. And that's what false religions are. It took us away from our own authenticity, our own realness within us. And because we followed that path, in high school classes, in countercultural parks from Boston to San Francisco, we became alienated from our own heritage and from our own cultures that we were born into. And our own heritage, what we were born, our ethnicity, our neighborhood, these things are swords and shields to protect us. They don't mean... They mean everything, MEAN. They are vital to who we are, where we come from. They are our ancestors, really our spiritual legacy that we carry on. And what Carlos Castaneda was doing with many, many others was cutting us from our own heritage. And he was orchestrated to do this. And he was part of the social engineering. He was a graduate student out in California, and he created this mythic person, Don Juan, and he combined esoteric studies from Hermetic Europe and from the Far East, Zen and Taoism, and he put in a kind of a soup, and he made this soup, and it came out Don Juan. And he did meet with many people, Alan Dulles from the CIA, many influential people in New York City that promoted his books. And the first two books, and within his books were the weapons to lead us into a false world. And these are called memes. And the memes are really things that take on, like a tsunami, they take on a life of their own. They are purposely put into society as an idea, as a phrase, as a concept. And the Carlos Castaneda concept was that the world of Western Europe was decayed, deranged, and a terrible way to go, and we must follow the Don Juan path. And the Don Juan path was, again, a lie.
Fantasy.
If he had left it alone, and I'm sorry?
Yes, a fantasy.
Yes, a fantasy. And again, fantasies are fine, but if they become a meme to destroy, to really rip us, to make us alienated from our own culture and our own heritages, then they become a weapon. And fantasy becomes a dangerous element. So his books became social memes. They became things that were the reviews of the books. They spread from one high school to the next, from one college campus to the next, and they became part of the music scene. So you would follow the counterculture, and you would take the drugs, and you would read Carlos Castaneda, and you would throw away everything from the past. Everything from the past you would throw away. And this was purposely done to really to take us from our own well-being and make us like an astronaut without the tether that connects them to the space station. And we are floating, and they wanted us to float. Again, we've talked about it before. Their ultimate goal was to make a subculture of these tribal Burning Man people who would never, ever have the capacity to rebel. Never. And that's what happened. They are...
Yes, and they wouldn't have the capacity to rebel because, as you used the metaphor of the astronaut without a link to Earth, they were socialized to be ungrounded through these types of memes.
Yes.
And at the end of one book, doesn't he jump off a cliff into a ravine?
Yes, of course. Tales of Power, I think. And again, I'm not preaching. I was a fervent follower of Carlos Castaneda. I loved his books.
I love those books. I did too.
I was living in Berlin, and I would search them out in old English bookstores and to read The Eagle's Gift and all of them. And they led me astray. So, again, I try to, what I write and what I say comes from my own experience, my own successes and my own many, many, many failures. And I bought into the whole thing. And then I realized that it was empty, and I realized that who I am, my heritage that comes from Europe, it was being denigrated by this man. And that how he ended his life, his followers basically emotionally and mentally unraveled, and one committed suicide, one went off into the desert and was missing. And his legacy is one of a really decay. And again, before we go to his legacy, let's go back to the memes. So his first meme was orchestrated to be part of the drug culture. So again, the Timothy Learys, the Jerry Rubin, these people who started the counterculture were there, the Jerry Garcias, all of these people were bought off to orchestrate the spread of LSD throughout our culture, the drug culture, into the young people. And Castaneda was part of that. And so his Separate Reality, his first two books were about the Indian experience with peyote and with drugs, and how drugs, through the experience of drugs, you could reach a spiritual enlightenment. So this, from him came Terence McKenna and all of this, a nightmare. And when in reality the only journey that is true in the spirit world is the one that you take without any crutches, without any stimulus. That is just you and what you have inside you, and that little voice that we've talked about, that is your soul. That's the one and only trip you should be looking to take. All else is a lie. So in the first two books, he helped promote, as Timothy Leary, as the big financial people who wanted to control this generation that had a lot of power and were smart and were growing up in the 60s. They wanted to condition and control them, and drugs was a way to control them. And so his first two books followed this meme, this attack, and saying that drugs led to illumination. And then the third book came, and there was a change. People were going away from the drugs, and people were saying, no, it's not. So there was a movement of smart kids to say, I'm not going to drop the acid anymore. I'm not going to do that. That's a dead end. So they were losing people, and he started to combine this kind of Zen, maybe European warrior spirit into his third book, Journey to Ixtlan. And then from this book was a life way. He said, okay, you must live this way. And that was my favorite book of all time, that and the next one, The Path to Power, where he makes the jump into this oblivion.
Okay, so Journey to Ixtlan promoted the idea of the spiritual warrior, which
but from
is
a point of a false world. It did not give. It just was a soup that was no soup. It wasn't chicken soup. It wasn't borscht. It wasn't miso soup. It wasn't.
There was no discipline behind it. Okay.
It was a combination, and there were great ideas that we all love. I mean, there were ideas that we all want to embrace about how to face the world and how to, be that warrior. And so we bought into it. We loved that book, and that book was so taught. That book just was a meme that was taught everywhere. In my school in the East, in Massachusetts, it was one of the best schools in America. They taught that book. A very sensitive teacher taught that book. And yet it was a lie. And so we didn't learn our own cultural heritage. We didn't learn what was admirable where we come from. So that we can kind of say, well, we belong here. Our cultures are okay. We make mistakes, but we have some good points. And we can maybe iron out the mistakes as generations
Our cultures
grow.
are as rich as any other culture.
Yes. And
there's this whole idea that European culture is a bunch of dead, zombified people that do not have any cultural heritage behind them.
Yes. Or destroyers, imperialist destroyers.
Right, colonialists, yes. Right.
Yeah. And that was part of one of the bigger memes. The overarching meme was to get us, disconnected from our Western traditions.
And then the self-hatred.
Exactly. And he was part of that. And that was a social engineering meme that is still going on today. But it began then. And he reinforced this and ignited this. And then once that was done, he went on to more esoteric. He went on to layers of reality. And he went on to another meme that was very bothersome to me. And this is when I turned away from him. I was a avid reader of him and would write down quotes in the book. I had a little book next to me in Berlin that I kept important things from his books, and I would write them down. And then I read about how to gain back your power. And in one, he talks about a woman having a child, and he taught the woman to, I don't know if it was Florinda or who it was, but he taught the woman to say, you have to think that you have to take this energy that you gave into your child away, that it's a fight between your child and you, and that you have to reclaim your energy and reclaim your life as an individual person. And then he had it was a big part of the book, and that bothered me. Because that went again. I didn't have Yana at the time, of course, but my nature rebelled against that because I knew that parenthood or love is a sacrifice. When you love something, you sacrifice for that, and that is the only way you show real love, because that means that someone, a little one, is not someone who's stealing your energy. You're giving your energy to that person. And I know now that I'm a father that when you give energy and it drains you, that you're protecting them, you're making them stronger. I have seen that as a scientific, spiritual fact, that when you give to somebody freely, they feel that love, and they are a little more stronger than other kids, and they're just more settled into themselves, and they have this inborn confidence. And I've seen it, and it works. And so he was telling us to not do that. He was dividing us, saying your children are your enemy, and you have to reclaim the energy you gave them in the birth, in their growing up. And I thought that was so. That was the meme was the me generation. Go out there. We went from the hippie culture where we want to save the world to overnight, within months, we went to I'm going jogging. The me generation. I'm going to, from let's save the world to now we have to jog. Then we had the Gloria Stevens salons where everybody went to look beautiful. Instead of for 3 or 4 years in the counterculture, they were talking about going inward. Now, completely changed within months. And this was another meme. And this was ignited through the media instantly, this me generation. And the disco, the trance music began, and it was a complete change. And he took part in that. And I thought that his separating the family, the mother or father from the child, was a meme that goes on today. That it takes a village to raise a child. That this
it's a very antisocial meme.
Yes.
If you think about it, as if you're in an energetic war, power struggle with your children. I mean,
Linda,
that's
right,
not really. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, that's. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish what you were saying. That's.
Well, no, just that.
That
I mean, it's a pretty standard part of being a human being, that you reproduce. You produce life, you create life, and that is not some kind of aberrant experience for someone. That it's a natural part of being a human being.
Well, they say for some of our indigenous cultures, I'm sorry to interrupt, but they say to just back up what you're saying, they say God expresses itself in the family dynamic. If you want to see God, then look at the relationship, that this sacrifice and love between people who have this bond, in the good sense. And when you see disintegration and you see the social engineering, you look at a family that is malfunctioning and that does not have this sacrifice and love. So Castaneda promoted that, and then when he got everyone, him and the other memes going on in the music, in the books, in the movies, all of this combined, then he went to I'm sorry, I kill this word, tensegrity, or you can help me.
It's called tensegrity. And It's a word from Buckminster Fuller that they took. It's about some sort of structural integrity or something like that. And yes, that
Well, it's
was
a physicality. So he went from, and that's
yes.
kind of the point. He realized that once the me generation came, that everyone now was centered on the body, on the surface. They had changed the culture to center their focus on the surface. And we have a surface culture. It's sad to say this is the most important. That's why we're told not to speak about these things, because it goes deeper than the surface. And if you want to do well in life, stay on the surface and don't go deep. And this is part of that culture that we're living in now, and it started with these kind of memes where he went away from he realized that people were not reading anymore, and he was too complex. So he went away from his books, and he created a physical exercise system in order to reach illumination.
Yes, it's a movement arts form.
Yeah.
That is kind of a combination. It's supposed to be the magical passes of the ancient sorcerers of Mexico, according to.
Well, again, it's another lie, another, it's another myth. It's not real. So they created a physical end path. And then the people who stood by him, they worship him. This is, sacrilege, what we're saying now, and millions of Europeans read him and saw so much value in him, and then felt that their own cultures, from Bulgaria to France and everywhere in between, had nothing of value to offer. And that's the sadness of what was lost. And that was purposely done. And if you look back, one day when the CIA records on him are released, you will see that this little graduate student from California, coming up from South America, developed into a million-book-selling machine with the biggest publishers. That cannot happen. I mean, this rags to riches story of America is not true. Without help, you cannot do things. I mean, anyone who's tried to do anything in the creative world will know that you need people behind you in order to manifest yourself. And
yes,
that's true
it's interesting. Yeah, his first 3 books were published while he was still an anthropology student at UCLA.
Yes.
And
he had help. Yeah, and he had help. They knew, his publisher knew, and that's not my opinion. That's fact. His publisher and his editor and the professors at where he was at school, they knew it was a lie, and they promoted this. And again, he had the biggest publisher.
Scribner, right?
For that 3rd book. And then how do you get a book into the school systems? I mean, that takes, that's immense. It's immense
that takes
power.
Some connections, absolutely.
Yes. And I think that's where we are left today. We are left empty. We are left on the surface because our life experience is filled with these people who were not for our best interest. They were leading us again to emptiness, and that's why we now are afraid to speak and afraid to look anywhere deeper. I hopefully this is not a tangent I'm going to go off on, but hopefully it will connect to what we're talking about. I was sitting near a woman who was with her family, and they moved off, and I was sitting, and she was small talking, and she suddenly looked at me and she said, things here are changing so fast, and they're not for the best. And I said, oh, wow, I thought to myself, this is, so few people read my work, or I can have this conversation, and here's a woman really mainstream saying that there's something wrong. And she said, it's so different. It's so is just almost not real. And she was shaking her head. She was working herself up into this. Something was going on. Something was loosening. It was something inside her. She was almost breaking free. And then I said, you're right. You're absolutely 100% right. There is something wrong, and it's not getting better. And it's only that people don't want to see what's happening, that we're almost becoming anti-human and anti-life. And then she looked at me, and another kind of physical manifestation happened on her. She changed. She shut down. She completely shut down and shut off. And you could see it on her face. She didn't want to, she understood it was true, but she didn't want to take the next step. And I guess the next step is to say, well, what are we going to do about it? And she didn't want to go there, and she just did not want to go there. So she just went back to the surface. And it was so sad to see that facial change of being a thoughtful, perceptive human being and then shutting it off and not wanting to know. And I think all of this, that Carlos Castaneda, I think he's part of that, if we can kind of circle this. I think it was their way of, with these memes, to get us to become this woman. And I think the woman I met is the kind of human being they want. And I wonder what she will be at the end of her life. Will she, if she knows it was, that things are anti-human and that had gone wrong, and then to shut that down, what does that eat at you? What do they do near the end of their life? What does that cause inside them? This kind of a split in the human mind.
Well, we have discussed this on other shows, and that is the mental disintegration and dementia and unreality that people are living in their elderly. Yes, fugue states that people are living in their elder years now, and that's considered normal and is enhanced with psychotropic drugs. So, legal drugs, psychiatric drugs.
Which numbs them, which keeps them on the surface. These drugs now, and there's so many people, I'll take hell for saying this, but so many people want the marijuana for their medicinal purposes. They want the drugs to numb. But it will be first marijuana, and then it will be the really hardcore drugs to just numb people. And I think that it is keeping people on the surface. So I'm very wary of what keeps us on the surface.
Yes, does not want to take the next step. The next step would be changing something about how you live, and also to not shut down. You would have to look at all the painful things that we have discussed this evening.
And that takes courage.
Yes. So, it is easier to shut down in a lot of ways. But we are out of time, unfortunately. And do you have any closing remarks? This has been a really good commentary. I just hope it's a little more food for thought for the few who listen, and that this helps in some way to realize for them that they're not alone in seeing something that is almost artificial to how we live now. That there are others thinking this, and hopefully us speaking this might help, or so I hope. It's the idealist in us, I think. Yes. Well, good night. And yes, this has been Change Agents Hall of Fame, and James BraveWolf's work is at jamesbravewolf.blogspot.com, and these shows are also on YouTube with graphic screen, and the name of the shows are Change Agents Hall of Fame. Thank you for listening, and good night. Thank you, Linda, very, very much. Good night. You're welcome. Good night.